Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hello, good evening.
Okay, thank you. I hear you, Prof.
Thank you. Yeah, I see you also.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good evening to all of you, especially to our respected speakers, moderators, academic staff, students, and all guests from the outside and inside UPM. My name is Dr. Roslan. On behalf of the organizer, Faculty of Human Ecology, I would like to welcome all of you to FEM Intellectual Discourse Series. Intellectual Discourse is one of our faculty regular academic program. We can have an opportunity to gain more knowledge by listening to invited scholars from local and international to share their thoughts and knowledge. Today, we are so grateful to have two panelists from University Putra Malaysia and University of Tasmania, Australia. Our discourse will be moderated by Dr. Nuurrianti Jalli. Dr. Nuurrianti Jalli is Assistant Professor of Communication Studies, Northern State University. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Nuurrianti Jalli to moderate the discourse. The floor is yours, Doctor.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Roslan. Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to our online intellectual discourse session this evening titled The Hornbill Dilemma, the Coming State Election in Sarawak. This is actually the first forum by Sarawakians. The three of us are Sarawakians, myself, and also Prof. Jayum and also Professor James are all from Sarawak. And we are honored today to have you today to be a part of this historical event where we're going to talk about the upcoming state election. And I would also like to thank the Faculty of Human Ecology, University Putra Malaysia, for the opportunity to moderate this session. And maybe before we continue on with this session, I would like to take a quick moment for a Zoom housekeeping. Today, I would like for your cooperation to mute yourself throughout the session. And then this is for us to minimize noise and interruptions during the session. You can also choose to have your video on or off, but it's just that we want to make sure there's no noise coming in throughout the session. And for the whole session later, if you have any question, you can always drop the question in the chat section where I can read the question later at the second half of this forum. So the format for this forum is going to be 30 minutes discussion with the panelists. I'm going to throw a few questions to the panelists, and then 30 minutes we're going to spend on reading your question and any question that you have for the two panelists here tonight, this evening. So maybe perhaps we can begin our session without much further ado. I'm going to read a little bit about the background of this discourse. The Sarawak state election, must be held before the end of 2021. However, most people think it will be held sooner, given the uncertainty at the federal level and the recent Sabah state election. And this election will likely be a watershed moment for Sarawak politics, because for the first time ever since 1971, the governing coalition Gabungan Parti Sarawak, GPS, is not a formal member of the federal ruling coalition. Rather, GPS stands for Sarawak First and state nationalism. So how does this mean for the election campaign and the state of federal and state relations here in Malaysia? Will the rise of state nationalism push Kuching further away from Putrajaya? So today, like Dr. Roslan mentioned earlier, we are lucky to have two leading scholars on Sarawak politics. My former professor at UPM, Professor Jayum Jawan, and also we have Professor James Jin that will talk about this and other related issues later. So before we continue on, perhaps I can introduce myself a little bit. My name is Dr. Nuurrianti Jalli. I am an assistant professor of communication studies at the Northern State University in South Dakota. I'm also an alumna of Faculty of Human Ecology, UC Putra Malaysia, class of 2008. I'm also a Sarawakian, hails from Miri, Sarawak. My research areas are including media and democracy in Southeast Asia information disorder, media warfare, and media literacy in ASEAN region. And I would like to take this opportunity also to introduce our two panelists. Maybe I can start with Professor Jayum and Jawan. Professor Jayum and Jawan is a professor of politics and government at University Putra Malaysia. He is inaugural holder of Tan Sri Empiang Jabu Research Chair on Dayak Women Studies. The chair is established by Sarakup Indok Dayak Sarawak, SIDS, sponsored by the government of Sarawak and part at the Faculty of Human Ecology, University Putra Malaysia. He is also concurrently the inaugural Dean, Faculty of Humanities, Management and Science, University Putra Malaysia, Bintulu Branch Campus. Professor Jayum was also the former 15th Distinguished Tun Abdul Razak Chair at the Center for International Studies, and at the same time, the visiting professor of Political Science, Department of Political Science, Ohio University, Athens in 2015-2017. He joins us from Bintulu, Sarawak. Thank you, Prof, for being here today with us.
Thank
and
you.
also, I
It's a
would like to,
pleasure.
I would like to introduce our next panelist. We have Professor James Jin. Professor James Jin is a professor of Asian Studies and inaugural director of Asia Institute at the University of Tasmania, Australia. He is a leading authority on politics in East Malaysia and has published extensively in this area. According to Google Scholar, he is one of the most cited scholars on Malaysian studies. He is also the host of the popular MA63 podcast series, currently streaming on YouTube. Professor James is currently working on a monograph dealing with the recent Singapore general elections. Professor James comes from Kuching and has covered election in both Sarawak and Sabah since 1990s. He visits both Sabah and Sarawak regularly. He joins us from Hobart, Tasmania, where it's almost midnight. Thank you for being here with us tonight, also Professor James. So again, I would like to describe a little bit about our format today. So our discourse today will be very simple. 30 minutes of question with the panelists is from me, with the two panelists, and then we will spend 30 minutes answering your question if you can leave it in the chat box. Okay, maybe to kickstart our conversation tonight, we're going to start with a more generic question about the state election. Perhaps I can direct this question to Professor Jayum, and Professor Jayum can answer this. And then after that, perhaps Professor James, if you have anything you want to add in, you can always add in. I would like to ask this particular question to Professor Jayum. How would you describe the current political climate in Sarawak leading to the upcoming Sarawak state election, considering this will be the first election ever where GPS is not a formal member of the federal ruling coalition? Professor Jayum.
Thank you very much, Professor Nuurrianti, Professor James, Dr. Roslan. Good evening. Thank you very much for having me in this virtual seminar. I take the opportunity to thank University Putra Malaysia, the Faculty of Human Ecology, for hosting this good event. Yes, I suppose on everybody's mind is, when is the election going to be held? that is a very question on everybody's mind. In my opinion, it is not so important when the election is going to be held, but I think the more important thing is that the victors of the election, whether it is going to be held today, tomorrow, end of this year or early next year, the victor of the election is more or less known or certain, but we'll keep that for the time being. Now, addressing the political climate, I think this is a very challenging time. Challenging not because of COVID-19. I think that's everybody is using COVID-19 for all kinds of reasons and for all kinds of argument. Now, the coming Sarawak election is interesting because we have two previous elections preceding Sarawak election that will be coming very soon. The first is the changing political environment that is provided by the 2018 general election. Everybody knows that it's the first time the government that has been ruling for the last 50 or 60 years came down tumbling. So there's a change in political climate. So that change in political climate means that from 2018, there is no single political party or a coalition of political party that can win absolute majority to govern. And that when we say a political party, of course, we are referring to UMNO because that UMNO is the dominant political party. UMNO is a Malay political party. So when we are talking about one race, one political party, I think that is already out, as everybody can see. So that political climate is very interesting. Interesting because it gives many opportunities, new opportunities to restructure, to rebalance political coalition among the various community. Because all this time, federal politics is about Malay politics. It is not about Chinese politics. It is not about Indian politics. It is always about Malay dominant, Malay leading, Malay doing this, Malay extending out what they want to extend to others because they can win on their own. But after 2018, that is no longer the case. So that's why the political climate in Malaysia is very interesting, very challenging. That's number one. Now, second, we also witness what is happening in Sabah. Now, Sabah is also giving us a second political situation, political climate that is also interesting. It breaks barrier. It breaks barrier because everybody has expected that Warisan would have won. Why? Because Warisan appeals to the Muslim. Warisan appeals to the Christian. Warisan appeals to everybody. And the voters went back. Yeah? They want a coalition. They want a coalition of many political parties. I'm not saying the coalition that was chosen by the people of Sabah is a good one, but it is good because the coalition, that coalition that was chosen in the last few months is a coalition that comprises many small parties. No one party, no one political party within that coalition is a dominant partner. So in a way, it is also a reflection of what is happening at the federal level. So here you have in Sabah, you have one political party that is not dominant, but it has to appeal to the next political party, to the second political party in order to govern, in order to have that winning formula, that winning number to form the state government. So in a way, what happened in Sabah and what happened in 2018 are basically similar. So having said that, so how will that climate have any bearing upon what is going to happen in Sarawak, whether that's tomorrow, next month, end of the year, or even before, I think before April, before June, which when the assembly must be dissolved. How will that influence the people in Sarawak? But again, of course, Sarawak is not Sabah. Sarawak is also not Malaya, because when we look at the composition of the people in Malaya, in Sabah, in Sarawak, these are three entirely different composition of people. In Malaya, you have many small groups having to come together to form a government. But essentially, Malaya is a Malay polity. 70% of the people in Malaya is Malay. Only about 20% is Chinese, and maybe about 7 or 8% Indian. So even that, it gives us that intriguing result. Sabah, so many small group, but of course, the funny thing about our statistics is that sometimes they say Kadazan Dusun, Muru, Bajaus, but then sometimes they say Muslim, non-Muslim. So they keep on changing. But Sarawak is unique. It's nothing like Sabah, nothing like Sarawak, because there is the Iban, there is the Melanau, there is the Malay, there is the Bedayuh, Orang Ulu, and Chinese. All of them,
Right.
no two group can come together to form a government. Not enough majority. It has to be two or three to come together. So it is an ideal situation where it will promote inter-ethnic coming together to form a government, whether that be in the former GPS or in new coalition that will be the opponents of the GPS. So I think this is what is facing the people of Sarawak. So how they decide, what model they decide, I think we can talk about that a little bit more. But I think an initial introduction, I think that's what I would like. Yes, thank you, Nuurrianti.
Yeah, perhaps Professor James also have like some feedback or some response on that, because considering like the political climate in Peninsula is a little bit different from Sarawak, and we also know that Sabah also has different political landscape in a way, because we also know that GPS has been a very strong here in Sarawak State. So I want to know, based on your observation, Professor James, is the political, what will be the political climate that based on your observation, because we could see that there are a lot of groups here, especially on social media, because I do a lot of research on social media. I keep on following all these different groups, supporting all these different parties. But based on my personal observation, there's still inclinations towards GPS compared to other small parties. But maybe perhaps Professor James, if you have anything you want to add on that.
Yes, good evening to all your viewers. Thank you very much, UPM, for the opportunity to come and speak to all of you. I think there are 9 key points if you talk about the setting for this coming election. The first one is, I think we should not forget that this is Abang Jo's first electoral campaign. Although he has been a minister for more than 20 years, he's never led a campaign before. So he's coming in with very big shoes to fill, because the last time the election was held under Adidan Satem Tottenham, Tottenham won 72 out of 82 seats. That's a remarkable achievement. When you look at it, it's about 87%. So that's quite a remarkable achievement. So he has very, very high targets to reach. My take is that obviously he's not going to win 72 out of 82 again. But as long as he doesn't lose the 2/3 majority, it shouldn't be much of a problem. The second key factor in terms of the setting, I think, is that GPS has totally rebranded itself. Although the change from Barisan Nasional to GPS was actually a name change, there was no change in the 4 core parties. In fact, the name of the 4 core parties is exactly the same. They've sort of rebranded themselves after the fall in 2018, and now the tagline is Sarawak First. So this is again quite a big change compared to the previous years, because under the old Sarawak Barisan Nasional, it was always continuity in ruling rather than change. So this time they're selling the idea of that we're going for Sarawak First. I think the third setting is the COVID-19 has really created a huge downturn in the Sarawak economy. If you go around Sarawak now, it's very obvious in terms of industries such as tourism. Everybody will tell you that tourism is dead in Sarawak, and tourism is one of the major earners in the Sarawak industry. The fourth one is, I think, at the back of everybody's mind, is the change at the regime at the federal level in late February this year. It was quite clear that GPS played a major role. Without GPS, I don't think Muhyiddin Yassin would have made it as a prime minister. GPS 18 MPs play a crucial role. So I think that's also at the back of everybody's mind. The fifth point, of course, is that since GPS came in under the Sarawak First logo, they've been very assertive about Sarawak rights. They spent a great deal of the time talking about Petronas, oil and gas, and they even staged a so-called fact-finding mission to London, where they sent one of the assistant ministers with a group of people to London to search for so-called documents. So I think the Petronas issue will be coming back again, oil and gas. Point number 6, I think the recent change from opposition to government back to opposition again, I'm talking about the federal side, I think that will have a serious implication, especially for PKR Sarawak. As many of your viewers know, 3 major PKR persons defected from PKR led by Anwar and the Joy Muhyiddin group.
Mhm.
One, of course, came back and joined PSB, but still there's serious implications for PKR Sarawak because all these three were elected members. Point number 7, I think, is also in terms of the setting of Sarawak politics now. I think it's also important that we understand that the opposition is highly divided now. We have a new major player called PSB under former Finance Minister Wong Sun Ko. They're very actively on the ground. I've been getting reports that they're very active in the log houses. This is interesting because in the diet seats before PSB, people were on the assumption that it was Barobian who is going to lead the challenge for the opposition in the diet areas. That does not appear to be the case anymore because Baru is actually joining PSB. Point number 8, as mentioned by Jayum, I think the Sabah elections has some impact on the way people think about the coming state elections in Sarawak. In terms of the direct effect is this, a lot of people I speak to in Kuching, Sibu and Miri are telling me that state elections in Sarawak should not be held. Not because of the politics involved, but people are afraid that you're creating a wave of COVID-19 like what is happening in Sabah now. So this is something at the back of the mind. And of course, point number 9, the final point to make about the setting in terms of Sarawak politics currently is that everybody in Sarawak is talking about the current move by Anwar Ibrahim to overthrow the Muhyiddin government. If this moves succeed, of course, there'll be ripple effects in Sarawak politics. So basically, these are, I think, the 9 major points when you talk about, the setting in Sarawak politics as we head towards the PRN. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving the feedback on some of the key what we call it issues that will be playing great will play a high what we call great influence for our upcoming state election. I have this one particular question that keep on playing at the back of my mind in terms of the new not so new, I mean the rising of the state nationalism as part of the GPS call a way of attracting voters in our state of Sarawak. So what would you think about the rise of nationalism? Will that push away Sarawak further away from Putrajaya? This to perhaps to James or perhaps to Professor Jayum, if any one of you would like to answer on that. Because we could see that it's a part of the hashtag that that GPS leaders keep on using on social media like Twitter, like Facebook. They put Sarawak First, Sarawak First. Some what we call it peninsula political leaders see that as some sort of a separation between federal politics and state nationalism that's going to have this kind of a gap between.
So I think I'll take the questions. I know exactly what your question is. Your question is basically, will MS63 become the key issue in the Sarawak elections?
Yes, exactly.
The answer is yes and no. Yes, in the sense that every politician under the sun claims to be MA nationalist. It doesn't matter when the opposition or government, both of you will say that you support MS63 and you support the full implementation of MS63. Essentially, you're talking about full state autonomy and taking back the oil and gas thing. So I think for both sides, they will play out the MS63. The question is, how are you going to implement it? So that is one key issue. The second key issue, I think, in the coming state election, of course, is the performance of Abanjo itself. As I mentioned earlier, Abanjo did not win the election to become the chief minister. He stepped in because the previous one died.
Passed away.
So people will be judging by what has he done since then. And of course, for him, right, the big issue is that he has won on the Petronas issue. He has forced Petronas to pay the, what they call it, the sales tax. He has set up a Sarawak oil company. And recently he took a big picture of Petronas, giving, I think, more than 2 billion ringgit. So these are sort of the part of this overall figure of state nationalism that, we're able to force Petronas to do our bidding. I think in terms of the performance, they'll also be looking at the performance of the opposition. Now, what is interesting about the performance of opposition is that the opposition used to be government. Now they're back in the opposition. So, for example, in the Chinese area, people will be measuring the sort of the role played by Chong, who used to be the deputy domestic trade minister, against Dr. Sim, who is the SUPP leader, minister of local government. So they're saying that, in the 2 years when Chong was in federal government, what has he done compared to, say, Dr. Sim in terms of being a state minister? So you have this funny situation where people who used to be in federal government are now back being opposition. Now, would that affect the sort of issues that people play out? I suspect it will. I suspect for the Chinese community in Sarawak, they will say that because the DAP is back opposition now, they can raise a lot more issues compared to previously when you were part of the administration. You could raise a lot of issues. I think the other issues are the sort of things that we've always faced in all Sarawak elections. For example, pace of development. You know, people were very happy when it was announced that the Borneo Highway will be built. Finally, after 50 years of being in the Federation. And yet after the announcement, right, you have all sorts of horror stories about the Borneo Highway because it was broken up into so many packages. Some of it was not done on time. You hear stories about how, you know, they're not going to finish it on time. Basically, there'll be delays after delays. And of course, linked to that big money in Borneo Highway is that with the COVID coming in, another key issue will be how is the Sarawak state government going to restart the economy? As I mentioned earlier, right, tourism, Sarawak tourism, which is a major money earner, basically has collapsed under COVID-19. How are you going to restart the tourism economy? The other issues are related to basically rural areas. Again, nothing new in the rural areas is always the issue of basic development, and also what sort of subsidies are the government going to provide in the rural areas. Recently, we saw Abanjo trying to reach out to rural areas by taking on the expedition, riding on a very expensive motorbike all the way to Kapit to show that the rural area is not left out of mainstream development. But that is just one example when people can say that for the past 50 years, you've not really done it. If you really want to build a road, you know, why did you build a road? And people are talking about, even for Miri, you can't really drive out to Marudi. You still have to go through a lot of what they call timber roads and all that sort of stuff. Then you also got the issues of personalities. Because of the change in government in March this year, you have questions being asked, you know, what should we do of people like Barobian, Si Chi Hao? They switch back and forth, people like Ali Biju. Should we give them another chance to serve as a YB? Then you got a big personality like Wong Sun Ko, who has actually gone out and set up a new party, and this party is making real traction. Senior that politicians like Joseph Antulu has actually joined up with him. So the question is, you know, if they're going to really make an impact, and if they're going to win, then the question revolves around who's going to be the chief minister designate, right? In all the previous Sarawak elections, you didn't really have to deal with this issue, who is going to be the chief minister, because you knew that Sarawak Barisan Nasional will win. Given the context now, people are asking, you know, okay, if there's going to be a regime change, who are you going to put up? Are you going to put up Barobian, or are you going to put up somebody else? Are you going to restore the so-called the dream of the Iban community, which is to put up an Iban chief minister again, since the first two Iban chief minister were deposed? You know, so there are all these sort of questions that are linked to the coming election. And of course, on top of that, you got a second layer, which is specific issues linked to specific blocks in the community. So for example, the sort of issues that you play in the Bidayu areas, you know, basically Kuching and the surrounding, Syrian and the surrounding areas, they're very different in terms of the issues, say, linked to Orang Ulu, in Bakalalang or the Baram voters. They're completely different. And now you have issues, even in the Chinese community, it's not so straightforward. We know for a fact that the PDP boss is planning to get out of Bintulu, which is his power base for the past donkey years. He's planning to move to Cebu, and that again will disrupt the Chinese politics in Cebu. And of course, the biggest issue now among a lot of Dayaks, especially speak to them, especially among the intellectual class, they're saying, how is it possible that PKR is now under a recycled Chinese leader? I will not give you his name, but we all know who we're referring to, because it was always understood that PKR was supposed to be an indigenous party. So those are some of the key issues I see being played out in this coming state election.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor James, for the input. I want to ask Professor Jayum about his opinion about some of the constituents, GPS constituents. Is there any prediction on perhaps if GPS nominees is going to lose some of these constituents, like, you know, based on your observation, based on the performance the last 2 years? Professor Jayum?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think initially my statement was saying that the date is not important, but the victors is already more or less known or certain. So I think I still maintain that fact that I don't believe there is any worry of who to put up as a chief minister, because the opposition is not going to win. Yeah, all these opposition is not going to win because they are in disarray. I don't mean that GPS cannot be beaten. It can be beaten, but it cannot be beaten by the opposition because they are in disarray. They are disorganized. They don't have basic grassroots against a well-established former Barisan Nasional that have a well-grounded, well-greased machinery at the grassroots level. So I think that is the main challenge facing all these opposition party, whether that be under Sungko, under this boy Larry something, and a few others. So that's number one. And then number two, election is normally about personality. When you go to a Dayak constituency, rural constituency, Dayak more or less quite a loyal people to their leader. Now, people may think that why keep on voting for these people when your community is not moving, is not progressing. But the problem is that it's the outsider who is telling the Dayak people that they are not progressing. You know, you must have this, you must have that. It is the outsider. Why would a Dayak in a rural area wants to have a Mercedes and Bentley Benz to drive? There's no road for it. So I think we cannot measure development by what people in Kuala Lumpur have, by what people in Kota Kinabalu, by what people in Kuching have. Development is relative. If you are living somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you don't need a car, you don't need a concrete house, a simple, a long house. As long as there is opportunity, your movement is not restricted. You have the opportunity to make a living. So leadership is one important thing that is not going to drive away the Dayak voter to this opposition, because they are not giving good leadership to the Dayak people. How can a little boy lead a Dayak community, running from one place to another? Who is going to believe and follow that person? You see, Sungko is also having a good political party. He is going around everywhere, and he said that the party is going to have 82 candidates, and he promises this and promises that. He has been a minister for a very long time. Just look at his own area, Bawang Asan. How have the people in Bawang Asan progressed when he has been a minister for so long? So if he answers that question, then maybe he can get voted in, and his party can win in the next Sarawak election. So I think it is about leadership. So the key to winning has to be drawing Dayak support, drawing the Malay Melanau support. You don't need a lot. Chinese is already not with SUPP. Yeah? So anybody who wants to win, I mean, especially if it's a DAP, PKR coming together, you have to go out and reach out to the Dayak community, basically, and also Malay Melanau community. But that is not going to be easy, because Malay Melanau appears to be a solid community behind PBB. So that is the scenario. So with that said, come election, whether that be soon or later, early next year, I think we're going to have the same sets of government. The only issue, the only question would be in my mind would be, will that government have two-thirds majority or just a simple majority? That is the issue to me.
So you're saying that GPS is highly likely to win the next state election. It's just that whether or not they have like two-thirds majority. Yeah.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. All right. So I think it's an interesting, what we call it, perspective from Professor Jayum, because he keep on drawing like example from the Dayak community, and this leads me to my third question. Perhaps Professor James can answer this question. What is your prediction on the Dayak votes? Yeah? Considering there are some parties in Sarawak, some smaller parties in Sarawak, they're trying to push for more autonomy from the federal government, because they're pushing for Sarawak First, Sarawak for Sarawak, Sarawak for Sarawakian. So I would love to hear comments from Professor James.
Thank you. Really interesting question. My take is that the Dayak vote will be split, but it won't be split uniformly. It depends on which area you're talking about. So my take is that the Dayak vote will probably be split in the interiors. It probably will not be split in the urban or semi-urban areas. Now, interestingly enough, based on what I've observed in my own research, MA63 is actually not a big issue in the Dayak community. It's a big issue among the middle class, but it's not really a big issue in the Dayak community. The Dayak community needs are much more basic. Basically, they want a piece of the development pie. They want to be treated as equals. What they find is that after 50 years, they find that their community has not really progressed. So one of the things they always complain to me, the Dayak middle class, is that, if you look around in the last 50 years, how many Dayak millionaires have been produced compared to the number of Chinese millionaires who were produced in the last 50 years, and also the number of Malay Muslim Melanau millionaires that were produced. So their needs are a lot basic. For the Dayak community, MA63 is all about autonomy. It's all about giving the Dayak community a leg up, because right now my take is that the Dayak community is very very downtrodden. They see themselves. I mean, they used to joke with me that they are the third class Bumiputra. The first class Bumiputra in Sabah and Sarawak are the Malay Muslim. Second class Bumiputra actually the Chinese business community, and they ended up as a third class. Basically, they take what is left over from the first and second class Bumiputra. So MA63 is interesting in the sense that while they all talk about being champions of MA63, the Dayak community, equal MA63 with a very basic issue of deciding their own future and getting more government help so that they can, they can progress faster, because they think that they've been left far behind.
Professor Jayum, do you have anything you want to add on that? Oh, since like I said, there's some parties in Sarawak trying to push for more autonomy from federal government. If you have anything you want to add on that question or points by Professor James.
I do not dispute many of the issue that Professor James raised, but only that I felt that many of these national issues, state issue, actually, as Professor James said, it is important to middle class, upper class people. But I think majority of the Dayak, maybe about 60%, are still rural based, and I think this issue are not that important to them. Yes, it is good to talk about it and in the evening on the Ruai, but in as far as the life are concerned, I think it doesn't matter. So it is whether we still like to believe it or not. I think the bread and butter issue is still important, because they are rural. They need roads. They need a better river system to bring them to town, so that what they have in their villages can be brought to town to be sold. Small cash crop and all that kind of. So basic need is still the main issue among rural Dayak community. The Chinese is basically an urban. I think about 70 or 80% of the Chinese are urban. So I think the issue facing them, the issue that are of concern to the Chinese are quite different. But of course, similar to the urban Dayak. But the urban Dayak is only about 50%, 15% spread across the state. Malay Melanau issue in PBB are different. They felt that they're a small community. They have to come together in order to preserve their leadership of the state. So each community has a different set of issue. But so political parties, opposition parties, especially if you want to make an impact, you have to be aware of all this. You have to address each single issue. There's no one issue that will cut across that are important to the Malay, the Chinese, the Orang Ulus, no one issue. So you have to play to many issues that are important to different people in different areas. So that they have to learn. And this the GPS are well versed because every political party in GPS is addressing specific issue. For example, PRS is basically an IBAN party. All members are IBAN. All members of the State Assembly are IBAN in PRS. SUPP, they're all Chinese. Well, maybe 90% Chinese, one or two non-Chinese. So their issue is basically Chinese. So they are there to attract Chinese support. PRS, IBAN support. PBB, Malay Belanau, plus a few. So these are well catered to within GPS. So any opposition party that wants to go for it, they have to understand. They have to understand all this. So I said that opposition party have very little chances because they are using one policy that fits all community. It cannot be that way in a very diverse socio-economic background of the people of Sarawak and the various areas.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Jayum, on your feedback. So you're basically saying that GPS has all these different key players that are focusing on different group, and then because they've been, the leading coalition here in Sarawak State. So maybe perhaps now we can open our Q&A session from the public. If you have any question that you want to ask to any of these two panelists, perhaps Professor Jayum or Professor James, I can read it out for you. At least right now we have one question from Azahari Kamunri. This question is addressed to Professor Jayum. So the question is, the Sarawak GPS government seems not clear their stand to federal government. It looks like GPS wait and see what will happen to the federal government. Any comment on that issue, Professor Jayum?
Well, that's a very smart move. Why support a loser? So wait for the winner, support the winner. There's nothing in it to support a loser. So I think that's the way to go. But as you see that in Malaysian politics, nobody wants to support a loser. Once you lose, and then all the support will just leave you. That's happening in 1960. Everybody is supporting Kalung Ningkan because Kalung Ningkan was the chief minister in 1960. Until he fell in 1966, everybody left him. It's the same thing in 2018. Many components of Barisan Nasional tell us we will sing and swim with Barisan Nasional. Well, Barisan Nasional go under. So where are they? They should be swimming under to help float up the Barisan Nasional, but they left. So that's human nature.
Thank you so much, Professor Jayum. To Professor James, I received one question here. It's on my WhatsApp because it's from Facebook Live. So this question addressed to you, Professor James. This is more a hypothetical question. If Anwar Ibrahim is to become our prime minister, what will be the future for Sarawak? Because I think this is because what you said earlier on, Anwar Ibrahim, and the question is from there. So they want to ask about, this is from Fauzi, what will be the future of Sarawak if Anwar Ibrahim is to become the prime minister, considering Anwar Ibrahim is more Islamic in a way, and will his Islamic approach to politics will somewhat affect Sarawakian and Sarawak politics?
Thank you very much for that question. I don't think it's true that Anwar Ibrahim is more Islamic, say, compared to the UMNO leaders. I think if Anwar Ibrahim does eventually become the prime minister, it's a big if, because there are many groups out to stop him. In fact, tomorrow there's an article written by me about who are the groups trying to stop Anwar Ibrahim from being the prime minister. If Anwar Ibrahim becomes the prime minister, the only impact will be that it is very likely that GPS will switch the support. In others, where GPS will try to find a way to work with Anwar Ibrahim. This also means that PKR Anwar's party will suddenly become very powerful again, because right now they're highly divided, because a lot of the Sarawak leaders have left the party. In fact, almost all the elected YBs have left the party. The other big change you can expect in federal-state relationship is that Anwar will certainly crack down on some of the big contracts in Sarawak given to certain personalities. In other words, he will not allow a lot of these things to go on. He'll probably promote his own supporters in Sarawak. So in terms of the economy, there will be a major shift in terms of who gets what. But in terms of federal-state relationship, I don't see much change. I think this is a very, very difficult area. Basically, the problem with the federal government is that they do not want a full settlement of the federal-state relationship issue with Sabah and Sarawak, because they're very worried that if we give any special deal to Sabah and Sarawak, sooner or later, states with a very strong, how should I put it, state identity like Johor and Kelantan will sooner or later ask for the same deal. So it's very difficult for them to try to come to a deal with Sabah and Sarawak. I think the other big change that we can expect if Anwar Ibrahim were to become the Prime Minister is that I think the basic policy of leaving Sarawak alone and let Sarawak do its own thing, I think he will carry on with that policy. I don't think he will try to take over Sarawak in any meaningful way. Unlike UMNO, who's tried to take over Sabah and sort of mess up Sabah since 1990.
All right, thank you so much, Professor James, for your response. And I have another interesting question, like on my WhatsApp, because they're watching this on Facebook Live. So another question, this is to both of you, if any one of you want to answer this question, is that this is from Sharifa Mira. So she was saying that she observed there is an increased identity politic in Sarawak, especially when it comes to the Malay leaders and the Dayak leaders. So some of the Dayak community in Facebook groups are saying that oftentimes leaders in GPS or in any leading coalition in Sarawak will push for Sarawak Malay leaders instead of Dayak leaders. So based on based on your opinion, what will be the long-term impact of this rising identity politics in Sarawak? Will this turn Sarawak towards more similar to politics in Semenanjung Malaysia, in Peninsula Malaysia? So perhaps Professor James or Professor Jayum. So basically, she was asking because there's rising sentiment.
No, we have the question. We want to know who do you prefer to answer first? Jayum,
perhaps if you want to answer first, it's fine. Yeah.
So basically, in terms of identity politics, I think the person who wrote the question is essentially right. There is a rise in identity politics, but the biggest change in identity politics will probably happen at a slower pace in Sarawak, because the biggest contributor to identity politics in Malaya is actually political Islam. That has not taken root in Sarawak yet. So when you talk about identity politics in Sarawak, it's basically cultural markers rather than Islam. So that itself will play itself out. In terms of the question on Dayak support being spread out among the many different parties, I think that is a reality that has occurred since the early 70s. I think it was deliberate. The leadership in the Melanau Malay community and the Chinese community decided that the Dayaks were a threat to their whole, especially over the economy. So the Dayak vote was split. Now, the issue is that can the Dayaks come back together again? My short answer is no. It is not possible with the current group of Dayak leaders to come back together as a single bloc. Maybe Jayum.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Professor Jayum, perhaps you want to add?
Well,
on the question?
Yes.
Would you like? Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
In Malaysia, racial politics, racist politics, these are propagated by the people from the Federation of Malaya. This is where it all started. In politics in Malaya, it is always about contestation between the Malay and the Chinese, Malay and non-Malay. That it has been before the formation of the Federation of Malaya in 1957. You go back to 1948, you also go back to 1946. So this is all about contestation between Malay and Chinese, you know. Fortunately or unfortunately, I think Sarawak is doing slightly better. It can do much better. But I think in comparison to Malaya, I think politics based on identity is slightly better than Malaya, because, you know, why? Let me give a specific example so that we don't have to guess about, you know, what exactly. So, for example, in Sarawak, if you walk into any government offices, the chances that you will see a Malay, a Melanau, a Chinese, and a Dayak officers are great. If you look at who are the occupier of the top posts in Sarawak, there are Chinese, there are Malay, there are Melanau, there are Bidayu, there are Ibans and all that. You don't see that in certain ministries in Malaya. For example, in the Ministry of Education, you don't see any other people other than the Malay, who are the KSU, the TKSU, and also the Ketua Bahagian. These are all monopolized by one ethnic group. So how can one ethnic group understand what are the needs of other people? But at least in Sarawak, many, if not all, government departments, government agencies are having mixes. All the ethnic group in Sarawak are present in all government ministries and agencies. Now, the issue that is raised by the people of Sarawak is that, there are not too many top posts held by Iban, not many top posts held by the Chinese. That I agree, but the number of representation are there, generally speaking. So this differs Sarawak from the Federation of Malaya. So in terms of what ministries is always trying to promote, perpaduan, they say, integration, unity. They keep on having all kinds of jawatan kuasa, committees at national level formed in order to promote, understand this and correct this. But no correction has been made. Why? I do not know. But in Sarawak, we need to fine tune it. We already have all this integration. We are fighting about the quality of representation, not the quantity of presentation. Whereas in the Federation of Malaya, in the federal government, there is no quantity, there is also no quality in terms of ethnic representation. So this is something the federal government needs to show example. The ministries needs to show example. The ministers, how many from Sabah, how many from Sarawak? If you talk about wanting to understand what the people of Sabah, what the people of Sarawak wants, how can you, who perhaps seldom go to Sarawak, seldom go to Sabah, understand what do they need in terms of aspiration in nation building? So these are the main issue, Dr. Prof. Nuurrianti. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Jayum. So you were saying that our identity politics in Sarawak is a lot better compared to Peninsula because we actually have the number. It's just that we need to improve on the quality of the representation. So perhaps this can be our final question. I would like to address this to Professor James. So this is a question from Mr. Sivapalan Salvadorai. So he's asking, to what extent parties in Sarawak really represent multi-ethnic interests?
The short answer is that all the parties in Sarawak, one unique feature is that they don't deny party membership to ethnic groups or religious groups. In other words, you can be anything you want and you can join any parties. But at the top leadership level, I think they do things in terms of how should I put it? When it comes to big projects, I think they do things in terms of how to carve out the project according to the major ethnic groups. At the very top, I do not think they promote ethnic identity. What they promote is your what they perceive to be your share. So if there's going to be a big project, they'll say that, you know, this share goes to this community, this share goes to that community,
Right.
this share goes to this community. And unfortunately, because the political party system in Sarawak is driven mostly by ethnic mobilization, this is a sort of a natural outcome. It's also the fact that at the very top of the Sarawak political tree, it's always understood that, you know, you need a Malay Muslim leader. So there's never even an attempt to think of putting somebody else in. Unlike Sabah, where they had a rotation system. In Sarawak, the political leaders have never even thought of that. What is widely perceived, and I'm not sure whether this is true, is that there's always this assumption that the Melanau Muslim vote is solid behind one party, PBB. And as long as PBB can control this group of voters, PBB will basically control about at least 1/3 to half of all the seats that they want to agree. And therefore, by default, Malay, Muslim or Melanau will become the chief minister. But again, this thing has not been tested. It's just something that the political elites believe in. In other words, they believe that if you appoint somebody else, it might lead to political instability. So that's the reason why, if you look at PBB, right, for years they've been saying that their biggest success in terms of federal-state relationship is not how much money they can get for federal government. Their biggest success is the fact that they've been managed to keep UMNO out of Sarawak. So that's always the rallying cry, right? Because I would have thought that if you talk about success, right, you say, oh, I managed to get the federal government give me billions and billions of dollars. But no, their biggest success is that we don't have UMNO here, we don't have Gerakan, we don't have MCA, we just force them out because we are so big and dominant here in Sarawak.
All right, thank you so much, Professor James. Maybe Professor Jayum, if you want to add some more points to that question.
Yeah.
So we have like 4 minutes before we do like a 5 minutes final remark from both of you.
Yes, in
later.
terms of identity politics, I think Sarawak and the Sarawak people must maintain their multi-ethnic character and their multi-ethnic understanding in order to still continue to be a model for the people in Malaya, especially, and also maybe to some extent for the people in Sabah. That is the only way forward for Malaysia. Malaysia is not a Malay country. Malaysia is a Malay dominated. Yes, Malay, there are about 58% of the Malay, Semenanjung, plus a few from Sarawak, Sabah, maybe about close to 60. So 40% non-Malay is quite substantial, and we need to work together. The minorities, of course, are willing to work together. It is always the majority that don't know what. So they have to change their attitude. That's not the way. That's not the way to move forward. You know, Malay needs non-Malay. Non-Malay also needs a Malay. In order for us to build a better Malaysia, because our competitor is not the Malay, it's not the Chinese, it's not the Dayak. Our competitor is other people from other countries, in order for us to make Malaysia great in the region and in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Jayum. So maybe we going to go around like one final round, perhaps starting from James. I'm going to give like 5 minutes for you to have your closing remarks if you have anything you want to to say. And then also next we're going to go for Professor Jayum for another 5 minutes, and then we're going to close the session. Professor James?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I don't actually need 5 minutes. I only need about 60 seconds. So basically, I think this election is in some ways a watershed election. Although Jayum is very gung-ho that GPS will do very well. I think, yes, on paper, I think GPS will do very well in terms of winning government. Like him, I also think that GPS will win the next state election, and it's the margin of victory that we're going to watch out for. But I suspect things will change drastically. The reason why I said this is a watershed election is that things will change drastically because you've got opposition parties appear out of nowhere, like
Mhm.
PSB, suddenly are able to organize all sorts of things in rural areas. Previously, new parties never stood a chance. You also have an interesting makeup of young people coming in. As you know, they changed the lower voting age, so that's going to impact in the next round election. So a lot of young people are going to get involved in this election, although most probably they will not. It's not in time for them to vote for this election. The sort of things that they pick up in this election will be reflected in the next election. I think the other reason why I would argue that it's really a watershed election is for a very simple reason that we have reached a threshold where almost all views are represented now, and that's because of social media. If you remember, compared to 2016 or even earlier than that, right? The mainstream press still plays a very important role. I'm not sure that is true today. I mean,
Right now.
if you look at what happened in Sabah, right? In Sabah, it was very clear. WhatsApp played a crucial role in the way they swing the votes at the very last minute, or that sort of thing. And I suspect in Sarawak, WhatsApp and private groups like Telegram, all those things will play a crucial role. It is no longer, social media is no longer the domain of the urban areas. So even at the rural areas, people are watching small clips. They're reading the messages of WhatsApp and all that sort of thing. So I think in many ways this will be a watershed election. In other words, people are no longer afraid of saying that GPS will stay there forever. People think that GPS can be defeated if, for example, there's one united, very strong opposition led by a strong, charismatic leader. So people don't talk about GPS staying there forever. It's not like during the time of the BN when people thought that, it doesn't matter what we do, BN will stay there forever. So I think the thinking has changed. And I see this very often in the young people that I interact with in Sarawak. Most of them think that sooner or later GPS will be replaced. It is not a given thing that GPS will stay forever. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor James. So perhaps we can go, Professor Jayum. Do you have like any final 5 minutes closing remark?
Thank you very much. Yes, James. Even even the Titanic can be sunk. So GPS is not a Titanic. Although I say GPS will win, I'm not sure whether that is fortunate or unfortunate. But I'm hoping that even if GPS is not being changed by the people of Sarawak, I would still want to see change by GPS themselves, because they have to be more humane. If you want to be a leader at this modern age, you cannot take, if you are a Malay, you cannot just simply take care of your Malay. That's not enough. You are not a chief minister for the Malay. You are the chief minister for Sarawak. You have to be concerned. You have to take care about the Iban, the Chinese, the Orang Ulu, and all that. I think that is a mark of a leader. There's a mark of that's a character of a leader. So even if GPS, as I believe, will be returned, I think that they need a self change, and they need to get closer. They need to be more kind to the people, because they are entrusted with this leadership. So I'm hoping that after being so long in government, the chief minister now, who is a much experienced person, will lead that party to a victory. But of course, I am hoping that he doesn't get too tired, because when you get too powerful, you tend to be abusive, you tend to ignore other people, you tend to not listen to advice from other people. You become arrogant. So I think just a simple majority is good enough, so that there will continue to be bargaining, listening, accommodating other people in an effort to provide good leadership and good governance. Thank you, Nuurrianti, Professor Nuurrianti.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Jayum, for your closing remark. I think that's the end to our forum tonight. I would like to thank you, everyone here, to thank everyone for joining us this evening, particularly to Professor James Jin, who is staying up late past midnight in Tasmania to share his insights. Of course, also to Professor Jayum as well for sharing his expertise on this issue, and to Faculty of Human Ecology, UC Putrajaya, Malaysia. And thank you for hosting this intellectual discourse, the first ever moderated by Sarawakian. The panelists, both panelists are from Sarawak as well. And I would like to hand this over to Dr. Roslan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much to the moderator, Dr. Nuurrianti. Thank you for both our panelists, Prof. Jayum and Prof. James. Thank you to all guests. Hoping we have gained as much input as possible for the discussion. Thank you, and thank you for everyone. Don't forget to fill in the form to get a e-certificate. Okay, thank you.
Thank you and good night. Good night, James.
Thank you. Good night.
Dr. Nuurrianti. Okay, and the rest.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof.
Bye-bye.
Jayum.
Bye bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks.